Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire. And we have Jonathan Schwartz tonight from Slam Wrestling. Jonathan Schwartz Esquire, may I add to that effect. And then we also have with Pinned, Ryan Boman, and of course the effervescent, ebullient, and eloquent Evan Ginzburg. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. I know it was short notice, but one thing I love about you guys is that you're always ready to talk wrestling almost 24/7. So I appreciate the hell out of that. That's always wonderful. That's always good news for my show. But I assembled this wonderful grab bag of wrestling minds without a real concept as to what we're going to talk about tonight, although there is always plenty of wrestling news going out there. Evan watched the most recent AEW pay-per-views and also the WWE pay-per-view. I don't know if you were able to watch those, Ryan, yourself or
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff that everybody's doing these days, and I've actually kind of enjoyed a lot of the stuff. I mean, there's some things that I don't like, but I know Evan doesn't like much these days. He's
it's not. I don't think he's a curmudgeon.
Person I know.
I don't think he's a curmudgeon. I think he just has some standards that I agree with on a number of things.
No, and I agree as well. I'm giving him a hard time, but I know he's always quick to criticize, and I'm sure he's probably got some thoughts on his mind about the way the state of wrestling today. But I always appreciate his opinion.
Yes, Thank you. Jonathan does too. He has many thoughts as well. So I don't know if he's kept to date. Now, one thing that was big news this week, though, I did want to start with was the quote unquote, sabbatical for Becky Lynch. And do you think that she's going to stay out of wrestling, maybe switch over to AEW, or what do you think would be next for her? Do you think she's done with wrestling? What's your thought?
I'm wondering, John, maybe you could weigh in on this too, because I'm wondering if maybe she's looking into a career with movies. Because, I mean, she's had an opportunity to make television. She's been in television shows and things like that. I'm wondering if maybe she wants to step away from the ring for a while and pursue a career in Hollywood.
I was actually thinking she might go in a bit of a different direction. The last time she really took any appreciable time off was when she was pregnant with her daughter Rue, and from what I understand, she's about 37, 38 at this point. And if she were to take off an extended period of time, maybe she's looking to grow her family a little bit further. It's awfully hard it's hard for a lot of women who are in this business to kind of get up. They need to kind of get off the road in order to do what needs to be done in order to make a real try of it, especially as they get into their 30s and it becomes a little bit tougher to have a kid if that's what they want. But again, I've got no particular insight to it, but the timing just seems kind of right for that. I mean, she's in her mid to late 30s. Seth is in his mid to late 30s. If there's a chance to make that happen, this would be it biologically.
At the same time, you can't blame her for saying I want to be
absolutely not. And to be honest, even if she decides that's not the path she wants to take, I think that she's been going pretty solid with the exception of that time off when she was pregnant, and she was right back on the road pretty quickly after that, and has had the baby with her, and the baby's kind of getting a little bit older and might want to be a little bit more settled as well. So, I mean, if she never wrestled another day in her life, I think that she's got a full enough life going on that she doesn't necessarily need this anymore. Same way that she might have when she was starting out and when the promotion was really kind of on her back for several years.
Vince McMahon always loved to play around with pregnancy storylines. For whatever reason, he was like morbidly fascinated with when people got pregnant on his watch. To try to, mess with who the father is and he is, always there's the Mae Young with the hand debacle.
That's part of what chased Lacey Evans out.
Yeah.
That he was trying to fabricate an angle with Ric Flair being the father of a pretend baby, and then life kind of imitated art. But I think it's also worth knowing that while Vince would work that into storylines, there was a really distasteful one with Lita getting pregnant and didn't know if the father was Kane or Matt Hardy, and then ski.
Oh, did we lose you? Did we losing Jonathan's?
There's the other.
Jonathan seems to have frozen in frozen Canada. I don't know.
Yeah,
there's the other infamous storyline where Vince actually pitched to his daughter that she would do an incest storyline also, like
right. I remember that too, and she said no way, and
yeah,
Shane was like,
so it's just well, I mean, again, I'll throw it to Evan because he's a great he can probably sum up Vince McMahon better than I can. like you kind of know everything he's about, or he was about, I should say.
He is not known for his subtlety as far as these angles. Let me put a different take on Becky Lynch. She's one of the best paid women's wrestlers in history. Her husband also makes a tremendous living. Combined, they're a wrestling power couple with few who are comparable, if any. So she's in the catbird seat, as they used to say. She could wait and see if AEW offers her a Mercedes Monet like multi-million-dollar contract, or she could take time off, or she could raise her children, as Russell was saying. I mean, there's a lot of options when you've made a lot of money, you have a lot of money, and you don't need the gig. Too many times wrestlers have to take what's offered to them, whether it's suitable or not. And she's not in that situation. She's in a very, very good power position. I could work, I could not work, I could work for WWE, I could work for AEW if they offer me a fortune, whatever the case may be. So that's my take on it. She's in no rush to do anything at this point. And I think more power to her. She's a very good performer, and she gives 110% in the ring. She has a history of excellent matches, and nothing but respect.
Well, and I would say I would agree with that. The biggest thing I would take away from that is that you just said she's in her late 30s, maybe now, or mid 30s, whatever she is, but she's in the catbird seat. I'm really glad that the wrestlers now are in that position where they're not owned by the promotion. They're not, there's a lot of guys, and Evan, Russell, all of us probably know guys that worked until they were almost crippled because they had to. At least now the kids are making good money, and they're smart about their money. Like they sign good contracts and stuff. And, you can't blame them for that. I mean, they realize that they're a commodity. They realize that they're professional athletes.
But they still don't have any kind of union together. They're still treated as independent contractors. And that's still something that, to Evan and myself really rankles us, and is something that I think, still needs to change. Vince had such that weird relationship with Trump, and even before that Vince has manipulated the political process enough that he's always been able to make wrestling that sports entertainment, shadowy type thing that isn't really show business. It's not really sports, and it's not right. They're not Screen Actors Guild members, but they're also not members of any kind of sports union like the NFL Players Union or the NBA Players Union or MLB or so forth. So they've been able to Vince really has ridden that penumbra of shadow employment for the WWE. And they even worked as essential employees during COVID, which didn't make any sense. If they're independent
I will say this, and I didn't want to cut you off, Russell, but at the same time, the fact that there are people that still get royalty checks that were in WWE in the 90s. That's not the same as having a union. I understand that. And believe me, I wish they had a union, because they should have a union.
They really should. I mean, they should have the collective bargaining power.
They've tried. I think that WWE tried to mask that with the we're going to send royalties out for pay-per-views and stuff like that. They tried to make it look like they were employee friendly, so to speak. And I know I have friends that still get royalty checks from WWE, and I hear about it all the time. Yeah, I got a check for $2.37.
Yeah, exactly. Johnny Valiant would call me up and read the numbers to me and laugh at the numbers. They were so minuscule. And this is $1 billion corporation, and their last 3 legends who passed, Superstar Billy Graham, Bushwhacker Butch, and Virgil, these guys all needed GoFundMes for hospitalizations and funerals and such. And it's disgraceful. Even the NFL, another greedy, $1 billion operation, they started to take care of their pioneers and legends. And just for good PR, WWE should do more for these guys. And the independent contractor thing is so ridiculous. I mean, these guys wrestled 300 plus days a year for them during the mid 80s, Hulkamania, rock and wrestling boom. And to not be considered an employee, when we did 350 days, Greg Valentine told us he wrestled 320 days, in the mid 80s. And Bret Hart said he wrestled 330 days in the mid 80s. So at what point are you an employee? There were New York City school teachers working 180 days a year with summers off and holidays and
pensions.
Yeah, and they got pensions and 401.
If I didn't have to.
And I want to let John jump in here, but the worst part of that is some of those people like Brett and some of the Canadian guys, the miles they put in, like some of those Western Canadian miles were hard miles because it was cold weather, blizzard weather. They were driving in dangerous conditions, and they were out there working.
Killed Adrian Adonis, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
And there were plane crashes too. For all the crazy stuff that was going on. But yeah, Jonathan, please pipe in, or we're gonna leave you out here. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel like we're not letting John talk, so
we got disconnected, and that's it. We've been bulldozing over his spot. So
that's okay. I'm not sure if I
in your mind right now. Just do it.
I'm hoping y'all can hear me.
I hear you, bud.
Okay, perfect. I was just going to start by saying, to Evan's point, I don't know if teachers unions are anything like they are up here, but they are kind of a third rail politically when it comes to politics up here. You don't cross the teachers unions, you don't cross the doctors or the nurses or any of those kind of public service providers. And the unions in all of those cases, at least up here, are incredibly strong and wield a tremendous amount of political clout, which, I mean, even compared to, say, the NFLPA or the Major League Baseball union or anything like that, it's a whole different ballgame. The part that I always found interesting about the union thing, about the independent contractor thing, is that there's been a couple of court cases that were brought. There was a class action that was actually brought a couple of years ago by Scott Levy, who used to play Raven. Above average Mike Sanders was involved, and I think Chris Canyon was the third representative plaintiff. And for whatever reason, courts basically default to the idea that in big bold letters on the standard WWF WWE contract, it says independent contractor. So notwithstanding the fact that the actual body of the contract contains provisions that by any kind of rational test is going to militate in favor of being treated like an employee, in terms of, WWE controls where you're going, where the shows are, how long your airtime is, what music you can use, what your costume is, the whole nine yards is incredibly scripted and your time is incredibly tightly managed, and you can't contract to work elsewhere when you're under WWE's umbrella. It seems to be changing a little bit now, but for the most part, I mean, wrestlers, there was the Highlanders a couple of years ago. One of them was actually caught in the stands on a TNA broadcast on TV as a fan and was effectively blackballed not only from WWE but from the business as a whole after. But courts just don't seem to be willing to, at least so far, undertake the analysis that you need to decide whether it's an independent contractor or legitimately an employee type relationship. And there have been a couple of attempts and they've all kind of fallen way short. And to be honest, I've never fully understood it. The difference between employer and independent contractor is basically set out by the IRS. It's very much kind of a smell test where there's any number of factors that can be weighed against each other. It shouldn't be, at least in my, dim up here Canadian view of things, it shouldn't be as much of a challenge as it has been, because the relationship is so much more in the vein of an employee relationship. The only thing I can think of is there doesn't seem to be a sustained push within the talent in order to do it. And I think what's happening is there a bit of a back door has opened as some wrestlers get access to SAG memberships. But you look at who's had it, guys who are towards the top of the card. You can bet John Cena has SAG benefits. You can bet Batista does. You can bet
well, because those guys have actually done movies and advertisements and things like that are.
But SAG's a low bar. I mean, Vader back in the day would have had it. The Miz would have it. John Moxley would have it. Roman Reigns did a cameo in a Fast and the Furious movie, so he would be eligible. I think where it actually stands to change, and this was the problem with previous efforts behind the scenes too, is that the focus has always been on the top guys, but the top guys aren't motivated because they're the ones who are really earning, and they're the ones who have enough coming in that they can sock it away for the rest of their lives, at least theoretically. Superstar Graham obviously was a different story, just as one of many examples. The thing is, you can't have a full card just with one or two top guys. If you have the mid-carders band together and force the issue, maybe you have a better shot at full SAG membership just for working for WWE, because you can't have a show without them. But their tenures have always been a lot more tenuous than the big name guys.
Well, let me ask you guys.
I was waiting to say that.
No, you're all creators, and John, I know you're a writer, and I'm sure that you've gotten hit with this, and I bet Evan has. I'm sure you all have. Have you guys ever had to sign a non-compete clause, even as a freelancer, where you have to sign a non-compete clause, where you can't write or you can't work for somebody else?
Well, those were actually considered unenforceable recently, so they've
been unenforceable here for a while.
Yeah, I hear what you guys are saying, but I also wanted to point out in California we have law AB 5, which turns independent contractors mostly into employees, except if you really have a narrow range of control over them, and everything else they do themselves. But it's clear that WWE has far more control than that. I think the new ownership of the WWE is going to eventually take this seriously and just say, you know what, you guys are employees. Enough with the independent contractor things. How much money do you really think? I mean, to be really honest with you, how much money with the 500 wrestlers they have, or whatever, if you wanted to be generous and just say 500, how much money would it cost the WWE to make them employees? How much?
Respectfully, I don't think that that's the issue. I think the bigger issue, and I'll disagree with you in terms of whether it's going to come out of TKO voluntarily doing it, mainly because the other big cash cow for TKO is the Ultimate Fighting, which is owned by Dana White, and he is staunchly anti-union. He's so hardcore against labor that he's been willing to let champions like, I think it was Francois Ngannou, basically opted to walk away from his contract because the bargaining there is so unfair.
It's hard to believe
That's
that a guy that likes watching people getting slapped just openly in the face repeatedly is staunchly anti-union. That's a shocker. That he thinks so little. He has that low of a thought of his standard human.
Well,
And the guy who walked away, and in his 2 boxing matches made more money than his entire UFC career. So it was the smartest thing he ever did. Sometimes you have to say, I won't be exploited anymore. And he made crazy money in Saudi Arabia with those 2 fights.
But Evan, I want to ask you that seriously. Like when you were making movies, did you ever have people like ask you like, you have to sign a no compete. You can't do anything but work for us. Did they ever like try to lock you down like that? Because I've had to sign those before, and it's really weird.
Not for a solo film project. No, not that I'm aware of.
Because there really wasn't much competition for something like that. I mean, who is going to also make something like The Wrestler or 350 Days? You guys were the only guys that were going to do something like that. So it's different when you're in something that's highly competitive, like some of the things, Ryan, that you've done with Sportskeeda, right? I'm sure that's the kind of place that would have you sign a non-compete thing.
Yeah, I did.
Because there's lots of people that write about, sports in general. But when it's something that's very unique, a non-compete clause is often not used because they don't think that someone's going to put effort into that. Different businesses have different levels of that, but recently,
I just always wondered because I thought about it like, it's got to be kind of what I always think that when somebody comes up with a good idea, somebody's going to try to steal it. That's what I always think.
That's kind of how it is. The imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. The big thing too about non-compete clauses is, have you ever found someone to actually enforce one? And actually, go to court and get a court to do something about it. And it's very hard to, because most courts are going to very narrowly restrict it and say, unless it's something that they can show that you're competing with them in spite of that, and that you're actually siphoning off the clients of another person. That just being in business for yourself.
If you look at it in terms of wrestling, if you think about it, like everyone, they can't use their name.
Right.
They can't be who they are. Like if Becky Lynch went somewhere else, she's going to have to be Rebecca Quinn. She's not going to be Becky Lynch.
Yeah, but the fans know, like with Mercedes Moné, I don't think that's the biggest issue at this point.
Yeah, well, it's something, but
use the name.
But the more that a company tries to exert its control over someone like that, the more they become employees, and the less they are seen in the eyes of the law as an independent contractor. You can write on a piece of paper a contract saying, I'm an independent contractor, but if all the things you do fall under the area of the law that says that you're actually an employee, at least in California, that you're going to be an employee, not an independent contractor. After AB5 was passed, it was only a couple of years ago, so it's still working its way through right now. But I think eventually it's going to bite, these places like UFC, if they want to do business in California, they're going to have to adhere to the law, and it's just going to be less expensive in the end for them to just say, okay, fine, you're employees. I can't imagine how much it would really set $1 billion corporate. Let's just put it this way. All these other companies manage to have employees, like, Federal Express or AT&T or Comcast or whatever. They have employees.
We got people working in WWE that are making $5 million a year.
Sure.
And they don't even wrestle that much.
But they still should.
Evan's pointed this out before many times. They wrestle 6 times a year, and they get paid $6 million.
They're still employees. That's still, that just, I don't understand how.
And the job isn't just the wrestling appearances. The job is also all the PR that they do. It's going on the
no, and I agree with
TV shows.
John, and you're right. And it is working out. It's the miles and the working out, and everything they do. It's not an easy life. I would never say that being a wrestler is an easy life, but it's a lot easier now than it was in 1985.
Yeah, my argument is that they should have the collective bargaining power that all other unions have, because they're in a collective business together. And because they should be afforded that same protection that against a big employer like the WWE has proven itself, or even AEW has proven itself.
So can I throw two things out? The first is a question. So you mentioned what the law is in California, but as far as I know anyway, WWE was not and TKO is not headquartered in California. So jurisdictionally, you would think that any wrestling company or any sports or entertainment company that would take advantage of more owner-friendly business laws. So for example, I know a lot of them are headquartered in Delaware because they have more lenient corporate laws. I think one of the reasons WWE incorporated in Connecticut as opposed to, say, New York State is that it's not necessarily as hard to do business in Connecticut from a legal perspective as it can be in New York. I mean, the prosecution against Donald Trump that just wrapped up was brought by the Southern District of New York, which is, I mean, even up here we know about them. That's a very kind of active branch of the prosecution. So I'm curious about that part. The other thing is, I think that if we were looking ultimately for a better approach to labor for wrestlers as a whole, I'm really surprised that it didn't come with the beginnings of AEW, because I would have thought Tony Khan, for owning an incredibly successful multi-billion-dollar football team, which has thrived in the NFL, which is itself a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and has a robust union, and has been able to win, even with the recent allegations around concussions, has been able to win benefits for its players on a pretty frequent basis. How that didn't enter more into the conversation. And I know when AEW first started, Cody Rhodes was at the time he was a member of the office too, was asked about it. And he took the position as talent that he didn't want a union, that he thought it would adversely affect AEW's ability to compete. And I've never quite understood that either.
That's an excellent
There will never
point.
be a union in wrestling. That will never happen. I mean, as much as I wish it would, it will never happen. Because the boys are the boys, and they're out for themselves. And that's the truth. And everybody, as much as everybody are friends and all that stuff, at the end of the day, everybody is an independent contractor, like we just said, and they have mouths to feed. So there will never be a union, because the guys will never stick together that much. And I hate to say it that way, but I mean, I know wrestling.
Poignant thought. I don't say you're wrong in your analysis of it. That's why it hasn't happened so far. And you're right. AEW should have done that, but I'll tell you this: when Tony Khan created a viable competitor to WWE, all he had to do was dangle, the money out there like meat to the wolves, and they all ran, screaming over to AEW. A lot of wrestlers, fled to AEW. So he didn't need a union, because to get people to work for him, he just needed to throw money at them. And
yeah, and I mean, I hate to say that, because I hate saying that everybody in the wrestling business is selfish, but I mean, they have to look out for themselves. It's not
enough of them are. I think there are some that would believe in it. I mean, Jesse Ventura believed in it and tried to get some guys to work with him, but Hulk Hogan totally stabbed him in the back.
Sergeant Slaughter too.
Yeah, they didn't want it, and like you said, Ryan, you have to have everybody pulling together to make a union work.
Much earlier.
That's the hard part, getting the guys to all pull together. That's the hard part.
Billy Graham, Ivan Koloff, and Ernie Ladd, basically the three biggest heels in the 1975, 76, 77-ish. Koloff was back in 78. Basically, they said, pay us all as headliners. Pay us all as headliners. You know, whether I'm in the main event, Ivan's in the co-feature, Ernie's in the tag championship, whatever the case may be, we all want to be paid as headliners. And they were such big stars, and they didn't have a lot of other heel headliners at that point, that they had the power to, you know, make some demands. And these three guys stuck together. The question is, will 300 guys stick together, guys and women? So I think Ryan has a very valid point.
They won't. And you know, and Evan, you can probably back. I don't really know a whole lot about this story, but and you guys, Russell probably knows a lot about this too. But the tape they made, the one from the from down south, it was Ronnie Garvin and Bob Roop, and they were all on. They were trying to expose the business, and that was kind of their way of trying to unionize or something. It didn't work.
It exists. I mean, it does exist.
Is that the one that was on NBC, the Secrets of Pro Wrestling?
Oh, no. This was way
No, I think it was Bob Roop and Ronnie Garvin and oh God, who else was on it? It was Bob Orton was
Eddie
on
Mansfield.
It. Well, Eddie Mansfield was on.
Eddie Mansfield was separate.
That was a different thing. That was on Nightline or something. But yeah, they were all people that were exposing the business, and their biggest thing was, if you don't pay us, we're gonna tell everybody that wrestling's fake. And that was also kind of their. Go ahead. John.
They were also in a lawsuit with the Fullers.
Yeah, they were suing Ron Fuller at the time.
But the irony of it all is that Vince himself exposed the business because he didn't want to pay the fees at the arenas. So Vince said it's sports entertainment. It's not a sport, you know. And he
didn't want the athletic commission involved.
The irony of all of it was they all were supposed to be blackballed, and then Ronnie Garvin ended up being the NWA World Champion. Someday later, they were all supposed to never get a job again, but they all ended up working. Well, I mean, look at like Randy Savage's family. They were supposed to be an outlaw company, and they ended up getting back in the business, you know. And I mean, it's just, I think a lot of that stuff when they say, oh, this guy's an outlaw, he's this or that, eventually when they knew that, you know, it was money to work with them, they wanted to work with them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like Lawler and Savage, that was money. They worked together because that was money.
Sorry, can I just throw one quick thing out there?
Yeah, as long as you stop apologizing.
Yes.
Canadian.
Yeah.
I actually had the opportunity to review a book on slam wrestling a couple of weeks ago that covers a lot of these cases, including the Fullers and Bob Roop and Ron Garvin, including the independent contractor issue. It's called Professional Wrestling and the Law, Legal Battles from the Ring to the Courtroom by Professor Alex B. Long. He's an actual law professor. And
how come you didn't write that?
For me?
No, it's Jonathan. That should have been
your book. He got to it first. I was too busy looking at Bray Wyatt
wasting
being
time
a
on this
Stephen King
show.
fan.
You're wasting time on this show instead of writing your book on law and wrestling.
I got to admit, this is better than the book that I would have written. It's more comprehensive, and because jurisdictionally all these cases are in the U.S., it's much more. He has a much better sense of U.S. law than I do, to be front. And it's a very good book. It's not necessarily one that's written primarily with a non-lawyer in mind, but if you're somebody who's ever been curious about how law works, whether you're a wrestling fan or not, I recommend it very highly. And if you're a wrestling fan who wonders kind of why certain things are the way they are from a legal perspective, I found that it did a really good job of answering a lot of those questions.
Another book I'd really recommend is Death of the Territories. Tim Hornbaker, I believe.
Yep.
Yes, and he goes into real detail about how the promotions all backstabbed each other. It wasn't just Vince. Basically, you know, they would all cross the line, cross the boundaries, and try to take over the other guy's TV and such. And very detailed book, and you know, a big book. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of pages and great
Evan,
detail.
do you know Mike Mooneyham?
Oh yeah. Mooneyham's great. Yeah.
I love he has one of the greatest books about wrestling called Sex, Lies, and Headlocks. That's one of the best books I've ever read about wrestling. I would recommend. I love Mike Mooneyham. He's like one of my heroes as a writer.
Yeah.
He's
And Mike also is a champion for wrestling. He loves it and he respects it.
Yep.
And that's why he's critical of it. You know, if I have to answer for the 5,000th time, why do you watch it if you don't like it? That's so off base. I love wrestling, and you want it to be great. You want it to, you want the wrestlers to be taken care of. You want the matches to be of quality. You don't want it to be a circus. And yeah, so last week when I watched the AEW pay-per-view, I enjoyed a lot of it. A lot of it was excellent, but I'm not the guy for exploding sneakers and, you know, lynchings and, you know, all the nonsense that they had on that show. I mean,
didn't the one kid come out with like a fire thing?
Yeah, they put a wrestler on fire. They brought a flamethrower out and literally set a wrestler on fire.
And he came back to win.
Yeah. So you know, when I said that Brock Lesnar took a tractor and lifted the ring, that was Vince's nightmare vision of wrestling. You know, that was it. That was the moment. No, AEW more than topped it when they set a guy on fire.
I didn't see that pay-per-view. The guy actually lit the other kid on fire.
Yes, like in a movie. The guy was
Don't
set up.
try this at home, kids.
Yeah.
Don't try this at home. I've never. I know that, you know, wrestling has the history of the hardcore matches, and look, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say I was fascinated with like the Abdullah the Butcher versus Dusty Rhodes, or when it would be Brody, against Cactus Jack or something like that, or you know, you'd have some extreme matches. But I've never really been into that. And believe me, I'm a friend of Vic Grimes, so I know what I'm talking about when I say I know about garbage and extreme wrestling. But it doesn't have the appeal to me to see people, you know, absolutely mangle themselves for.
I don't like that either. Like, and I have friends who are hardcore wrestlers, and you know, I always tell them, like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to. You know, but the kid getting lit on fire, that's dumb. Like, why would
it's dumb.
Well, like,
stuntmen do it all the time.
Isn't it the same kid that got thrown through the glass? Is he the same one that fell through the glass?
The guy who set him on fire is the one who went through the glass.
Went through the glass. They take turns. They take turns, you know, mangling themselves. The next time, one of them's going to go through an airplane propeller. You know, that's going to be the next.
Honestly, the worst part of that is they're doing and this is also the pay-per-view where Adam Copeland, who's 50 years old, decides to take a header off the cage and winds up breaking his leg in a mid-card match that means absolutely nothing to anybody. And I'm a huge Adam Copeland fan and have been since he first started. And I just don't understand what he was trying to prove there. The thing that I couldn't get past with any of this stuff, and I am an AEW fan, and I just wish they'd get away from, you know, this aspect. This is the same night that they trot out Martha.
Get away from the dumb stuff.
This is the same night that they trot out Martha Hart to announce the annual Owen Hart Memorial Tournament. And this is when this is what they're doing with her on, you know, backstage.
Yeah, that's really. And she thought about that. And that's really kind of tasteless.
And she famously refused to license any of Owen's intellectual property to WWE after his death for decades, and basically wound up signing on with AEW to keep Owen Hart's memory alive in part. And let's be honest, also to stick it to WWE for them causing Owen's death. And,
Absolutely.
And, meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Well, actually,
you're right about that, though, John. That's true because they've done some pretty dumb stunts.
Well, that is my next, the other subject I wanted to bring up was, I don't know if you guys read about the Frankie Kazarian quotes about AEW this week. I don't know if you...
Yeah, I saw it.
I saw he's one of many who's now said it's the inmates running the asylum.
Yeah. And
yeah.
It kind of leads to exactly where you guys were headed with the conversation here, is that, is this really a situation where, AEW is truly being run by, the wrestlers themselves, and Khan is so powerless to affect the booking or anything? And do they need someone strong to come in there back, do one of those noggin knockers where everybody's heads get smacked together and get them on the same page so they can produce? They have all the talent to produce some of the best shows, better than as good as the WWE does. So it's not that they don't have the talent to do that, and they have production values that are fair enough that people will buy. And they've gotten some. When Vince was really in the worst trouble, the WWE's ratings went down low enough that AEW surpassed them, but they couldn't hold it. Because whatever. I mean, that's maybe part of the inmates running the asylum. They don't understand. You would think the boys would have a better idea of how to make a better product, but instead the product wallows in mediocrity with only flashes of brilliance, kind of like what we see in the WWE right now. Why are both companies stuck with all this great talent but can't take it to the next level?
Because it becomes...
I'm going to shut up. I'm going to say something and then I'm going to shut up. You know what Tony Khan needs in the locker room? He needs a heater. He needs a guy that when these kids get stupid and they want to come up with all these dumb ideas, he needs an Undertaker. He needs somebody.
I thought that was Arn Anderson. I thought Arn Anderson was giving them that.
Well, I guess not, because he's about to leave. So, but yeah, he needs a heater. He needs a guy in the back that scares those kids. And honest to God, and I mean, I've seen it with guys in the locker room before. You need a guy in the locker room that everybody is kind of afraid of. And I hate to say that way because it sounds like a crappy thing to say, but you need a guy in the back that says to you, this is what you need to do. You need a grown-up in the locker room. They don't have that. They've got kids back there. And I'm sorry. And I think Tony Khan is an intelligent guy, but not when it comes to wrestling.
Evan, your thoughts?
I was watching last night, and Will Ospreay and Kyle O'Reilly come out, and these are two magnificent wrestlers.
Great.
As good as anybody. And I'm watching it, and they have picture-in-picture leading into just a straight commercial break. They come back for 2 or 3 minutes, leading into more picture-in-picture. In the middle of it all, Daniel Garcia, for God knows what reason, he's cut to watching the match on a big screen. And lost in all of this is the match itself. And all I could think of, I was in Korea with my wife a couple of years ago, and I was watching wrestling. And what they do is they show a ton of commercials before and after the match. It's like boxing. They respect the art of it. It's not okay to no exaggeration. They had to have 15 commercials minimum, if not more, during that Ospreay match. And it killed it dead for me. I basically lost interest. So if you could kill off the greatest wrestler in the world, arguably, in Ospreay, because you're presenting it in such a poor way, it can't only be about the entrances and the silly angles. The match itself has to matter. You would never cut into a boxing match mid-round. Never.
And let me just say this. And when the audience is looking at that and they see Danny Garcia watching it, you know what they're thinking? Who the hell is Daniel Garcia?
Yeah, he's no threat. He's no threat to Ospreay. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's a nobody. he's not like a star. You know, like they don't highlight their stars. I don't understand that. Like they have people like Miro, they have people like, they have signed so many good talents, and they put these kids on TV that nobody's ever even heard of. And it's not that I don't like Daniel Garcia. I'm sure he's going to be a great talent someday, but why would you put him on television when you have Claudio or Miro or
Eddie Kingston,
anybody that you could put on TV that's more photogenic to the audience than that.
Puts out a better product, you
Yeah.
know, on the ring. Jonathan, your thoughts?
I echo some of what Ryan was saying, that at some point there needs to be a grown-up in the room. And the last time we had that kind of conversation around AEW was when CM Punk was on his way out and getting into fights with people backstage. And at the time, I remember people getting all up in arms about the inappropriateness of CM Punk's conduct. A year and a half later, I'm almost wondering maybe CM Punk was trying to be the guy in the room and to be that kind of figure who was, physically or otherwise trying to get these other people in line. That's ultimately what led to him being dismissed from the company, that Jack Perry had wanted to do a dangerous spot on TV. Punk objected, and at the time he was kind of working behind the scenes on Collision, which was a new TV show at the time. And then coming up to AEW's biggest pay-per-view ever, the All-In that they did in London. And, again, Perry insists on doing something that's manifestly unsafe, and Punk gets in his face over it. And Punk winds up on the outs, and Perry winds up getting set on fire.
But, at the same time, John, you got to understand this. And I agree with everything you're saying. If you go old school wrestling style, I would have told Punk, whip his butt, like right now, do it.
Well,
like,
yeah, I don't.
But
Punk took
it's
a lot
a
of flack at the
multi-million-dollar company. You can't have a guy beating up their coworker. Like you can't, because he got after Jack Perry pretty good.
I'm not endorsing the violence.
If I was
part
his
of it.
boss, I would have to fire him because you just put one of your coworkers in jeopardy. And that's the difference now that wrestling is corporate. It's changed a lot.
Respectfully, wrestling was corporate when Chris Jericho got into Brock Lesnar's face after SummerSlam. Wrestling was corporate when Chris Jericho got into Goldberg's face when they weren't getting along. Wrestling was corporate when Batista and Booker T got into a fight backstage. I'm not endorsing it as professional behavior at all, but there's plenty of examples where tempers flare backstage, and it's not necessarily a firing offense. The only one that I can think of offhand that did wind up with somebody actually getting fired recently, not even recently, involved Sid Vicious and Arn Anderson stabbing each other with scissors back in the day, or Vader trying to sucker punch Paul Orndorff backstage and Orndorff beating the living crap out of him in flip-flops.
At least there were no flamethrowers involved.
Yes. What I would say about that is this:
leave that for the Sheik.
Yeah.
No, no, and I respect your opinion on that, but wrestling is not 1995 anymore.
That's fair.
And that's what I'm saying is now you have people that are making millions of dollars, and they have life insurance policies. You can't just beat up somebody.
And it's a publicly traded company. It's
right. It's a
totally
different situation. And it's not. I'm not saying that. I liked the way it was back in the day. If you had a problem with somebody, you beat you call them outside and you handle it like men. I have no problem with that. But now everybody has an agent. They have a lawyer. They have a wife. They have, everything. They're more invested in the business now than they ever were. Like the guys that I came up with when I was young, all they ever wanted to do was just wrestle and party. That's all they wanted to do, But now, like the guys these days, they're smarter about it. They've invested in their bodies. They've put in millions of dollars into the way they work out and the things that they do and the gyms that they go to. And so if you jeopardize that, if I was somebody and I had put all this time into being an athlete and you took a shot at me, I would be ready to sue you, because you could jeopardize the kind of money. You could jeopardize my earning power.
Sure, easily.
And
hang on. Sorry,
that's something that the guys think about now, and it's not that it's not that you're wrong about it. It doesn't mean those guys are put. Wait, I shouldn't say what I was going to say. It doesn't mean they're wussies for that. It means that they're conscious of their careers now. They're a lot smarter about it.
But what is the bigger lawsuit? An assault claim, say, by Jack Perry that CM Punk manhandled him backstage, or Darby Allin doing an unscripted plate glass spot where the glass goes flying into the audience?
I don't know if it was unscripted. The pane of glass was there. Sorry. They had to plan it.
Oh, no, I don't mean unscripted in the sense that it wasn't part of the show. I mean that it's like
the audience was not protected from it.
Exactly.
No, and that was a dumb.
To my mind, that
was a dumb.
That's a much bigger risk.
I remember
one Tony Khan has to be the adult in the room and put a stop to these kind of things that put.
No, and if I was in the back, I would have said, "Don't do this. Don't do that." Because first of all, you can hurt yourself. That's the biggest thing. I'd be like, you could die from this. Like,
one time during the show, we had, the security barriers, right? That are where everybody gets thrown into, all the time. And there's lots of sense. And one guy was just, leaning forwards like this, to watch the what was happening, and the security barrier just went and smacked him right in the face, because he was just leaning forwards too much. So anything can happen.
This guy, he jumped off a ladder one time and he busted his whole face, he busted his face on a table. And I thought he was dead. Like, I swear to God, I thought he was dead. Like, and I was like trying to wake him up. Like, are you all right? Are you okay? And his whole mouth was bloody and everything, because he did something stupid, like, don't do that stuff.
That's why wrestlers never put that they wrestle on their health insurance.
No, don't. Never say that. And matter of fact, never tell your wife you're a wrestler either.
No, they usually find out. Anyway, guys.
Make things tough for your girlfriend.
Yeah. Guys, we're running towards the end of the show here, which is really amazing, because I could go on with you guys for hours on these subjects. It's just, I think this is one of the most intellectual shows on wrestling that's out there. I
had so much fun talking to John. John, I'm so happy to meet you.
Very happy to meet you too. Me too.
Yeah, we'll get you guys on the show again. I'm glad to get so much brain power. So much brain power going on here that
it's mostly just a bunch of old guys complaining about stuff. That's all we do. That's pretty much the whole show. I that's the only reason I talk to Evan. We just complain about stuff all the time. We're just getting old, man.
Yeah,
but it's fun. It's fun, guys. So anyway, Jonathan, why don't you plug your column?
Sure. It's called Wrestler's Court with Jonathan Schwartz. It appears intermittently on slamwrestling.net. The last one just came out a few days ago. As a matter of fact, I looked at what's going on with AEW. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's been an awful lot of criticism, much of it justified, around the internet. On slamwrestling.net, there are actually a couple of columns calling for AEW to be canceled. I respectfully disagree with that position. I just think, I think we agree, Tony Khan really needs to step up and to put standards in place to keep his performers and his audience safe and happy.
Great. Evan, your plugs.
Please check out Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. We update it 15, 20 times a day. Yours truly, the senior editor over at Pro Wrestling Stories. Check us out there. Check out 350 Days, Wrestling Then and Now, the documentary with Killer Kowalski, Nikolai, Don Arnold, Homicide. And coming later this year, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. It's a short story collection, all true stories. And And that's pretty much it. And Mike Lano and myself are working on a John Tolos book.
Looking forward to those. And Ryan, go ahead, plug away.
I'm just Ryan K. Boman. You can find me on Facebook at Ryan K. Boman, Twitter at Ryan K. Boman. You can find me writing about baseball at Hebby.com. You can find me writing about anything at Total Apex Sports. And you can usually find me just hanging out and talking to Russell once in a while.
What about Pinned? What about Pinned?
What's that?
What about your company Pinned?
No, I'm not really doing anything with that. I'm
that's
basically just writing these days, man. That's all I'm doing. I'm kind of like, I signed a contract with this company and I'm kind of stuck in it right now.
Well, stuck. I mean, you're getting paid. That's not.
Yeah, it's good. Stuck. I mean, I like it. I'm not allergic to money. I love money.
Very good. Well, I have read your stuff. It's really great stuff. I mean, even as a St. Louis Cardinals fan, find something.
I love Evan, and I mean, Evan's like, all you guys are like the greatest. And I'm so happy to meet Jonathan. And now I have to follow him online somewhere and see.
You'll learn a lot.
Same here.
You'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being
on the show
at short notice. We'll get it all uploaded tonight, and I'll send you guys the links. Adios, everyone. Good night.
Take care, brother.
Good night.
Take care, guys. Take care.